going to do completing the square to solve. So we're still going to have quadratics, we're still going to be solving, but the method that we're going to use to solve today is completing the square.
Oh, darn.
Yep.
I said darn. Darn. But I was working on my next class. I have to learn about
Huh?
person.
There's 4.
Oh, we get progress.
It's on Google Classroom. Yep. All right, so let's get right into it, because you guys, this was the last thing we did with Mr. Fulton, I think, or towards the end. No, quadratic formula was the last thing. He did this before quadratic formula. I think this was something, I kept miming it on the board and it was difficult and you guys were kind of picking it up and kind of not. All right, so we'll start off with this. We'll do x squared plus 4x plus this is hurting my brain. Minus 45. Equals 0. Okay. So when you're completing the square, and I think I'll start doing it and you'll be like, oh, I kind of remember that. So the very first thing you're doing that you do when you complete the square is you actually take this number and you move it over to the other side. So the number that we're moving over is called the constant. You take the constant and you move it over to the other side. So we have x squared plus 4x plus, and I always leave a blank here, equals 45. And then I always take this middle term and take the number and I divide it by 2. So 4 divided by 2 is 2. And let's make sure we have all our earbuds out. Let's take them all out. 4 divided by 2 is 2. And then we take that number and we square it. So 2 squared is 4. It is coincidentally the same number. That only happens in the case of 4. It doesn't happen any other time. Okay, so then we take that number, and that number, we say it completes the square. You'll see why in a second. And if I add that number to the left side of the equation, then I have to add that number to the right side of the equation as well. So I'm going to add 4 over here as well. Do you guys vaguely remember doing that with Mr. Fulton? Okay, so at this point we have x squared plus 4x plus 4 equals 49. Now, if we were to factor this, we would be looking for two numbers that multiply to 4 that add to 4. Two numbers that multiply to 4 that add to 4. What are the two numbers? 2 and 2. And they're always, when you complete the square, they are always the same number. It's always 2 and 2, or 3 and 3, or -6 and -6, or 7 and 7, or -12 and -12. It always ends up being the same number twice. So if we have 2 and 2, that means our two factors are x plus 2 and x plus 2. And so I'm going to shorthand that. I'm going to write x plus 2 squared. And what you'll notice is that every single time we do this, the number here in the parentheses is exactly the same as what we got when we divided 4 in half. We divided 4 in half, we got positive 2. Positive 2 is what goes in the parentheses. That's going to happen every single time. If we divided the number in half and got -7 is what would go in the parentheses. All right, so that's a pattern that we're going to notice. So we've got this. Now our goal is going to be to solve for x. So we've done the process to complete the square. We've got this, but now we want to solve for x. So if I want to get this x alone, if that's my goal, how do I undo the stuff that's around the x to get the x alone? What's the opposite of square? How come you still have your earbud in? So a lot of people get really concerned that you think you're not going to use square roots. Math class isn't just about using square roots. Kind of like when people go to the gym, it's not just about bench pressing things, because I have never been walking down the street and seen somebody like lay down and bench press anything. However, it is nice to go to the gym and get strong, because people do like walk around and use strong muscles. Be honest. Okay. So we're going to undo the squared. How do we undo squared? We square root it. Square root. Okay. And when you square root 49, what do you get? But not just 7. You also get -7. Because 7 squared is 49, but -7 squared is also 49. You get 2 answers. So now we have x plus 2 equals +7, but also -7. X plus 2 equals +7, but it also equals -7. Okay. And then what else should we do to get x alone? Subtract the 2. So I'm going to -2, I'm going to -2. So my solutions for x are +7, -7. Subtract 2. So if I write my 2 answers down, +7 minus 2 is 5. -7 minus 2 you're close. -7 minus 2 -9. Perfect. And if these answers are nice like this, what does that tell me about the original problem? How could I have solved it? Starts with an F. Quadratic formula always works. We could have factored it. Yeah. So the quadratic formula would have worked for this problem because we know it always works. And then also factoring could have worked. Say that again? We were using completing the square.
Yesterday we learned
Quadratic formula, which always works. All right. Let's try another one. Okay. X squared. Minus 8x plus 4 equals 0. Okay, so our first step is to take the number on the end, the constant, and to move it over to the other side. First step. So x squared minus 8x plus the blank equals -4. All right, the next step is what? Yep, take this term right here, divide it by 2. -8 divided by 2 is -4. And then what do I do with that? Square it. -4 squared is -4 squared is 16, okay? So 16 is the number that completes the square.
Is this what? This was also a mistake?
And if I add it to the left side, I have to add it to the right side. So plus 16 plus 16.
So why do you have to divide it by 2?
We always divide it by 2 because that makes it so that the number works out here. And I'll show you, well, I can kind of show you how it works with the factoring. So if we write this x squared minus 8x plus 16 equals, what does it equal? 12. Negative 4 plus 16 is 12. If we were to factor this and look for two numbers that multiply to 16 and add to negative 8, for this to work so that these two numbers are the same, they would have to be half of 8. So that's why you divide it by 2. If you want the two numbers to be the same, they would have to be half of 8 for them to be the same. That's why you divide it. Yeah. All right. So
Are we having to do that in the first place? Like -4 and then divide?
it's the process of completing the square so that you can end up with something like this, where it's something in parentheses squared. That's the purpose, is you're trying to get the same set of parentheses twice, so that you no longer have a quadratic that's like big and drawn out, so that you can just square root and move on. That's kind of the goal, yeah. Okay, so we're looking for two things that multiply to 16 and add to negative 8, and what are those two numbers? Two numbers that multiply to 16 and add to negative 8, what are the two numbers? Negative 4 and negative 4. So we have x minus 4 squared. So just like before, the number that you got when you divided by 2, this is 2 days in a row. You guys noticed that, right? Okay. Happens again on Monday. I'm literally kicking you out. Okay. The number you got when you divided by 2 is the number that goes in the parentheses. So negative 8 divided by 2 is negative 4. That number is what shows up in the parentheses. X minus 4 squared. And then over here we have equals 12. So the nice thing about this process is there's kind of a pattern to it. And you'll notice it's very repetitive. So it's not a formula, but there is a pattern that makes it a little bit easy to like memorize the process to these. So from here, we looked for two things that multiplied to 16 that added to negative 8. I was just thinking about factoring. But the shortcut to this is, once you get to shut off your brain and just do the pattern repeatedly, is that whatever number was here, whatever you got when you divided by 2, that ends up being in the parentheses. Yes. So from here, if we want to solve for x, how do we do that? We have to, but not square, square root. We have to undo the square by square rooting. Okay, so this time 12 is not a perfect square, and so I'm just going to leave it on the right side as the square root of 12. But when I square root 12, how many answers am I going to have? 2, because I have the positive version and the negative version, plus and minus. All right, and then over here, the squared and the square root, those cancel each other out.
Are you always going to have the positive and negative thing?
And then I have x minus 4. And then how do I get the x alone? Add the 4 to the other side. Okay, so I'm going to have two answers. They're going to be decimals this time because of the square root. And I'm going to have to use my calculator to get them. So I'm going to say the square root of 12 and then add 4. So my first answer is going to be positive square root 12, add 4. My second answer is going to be negative square root 12, add 4. So we're going to do positive square root 12, add 4. Negative square root 12, add 4. Okay. So I'm going to write these down. I'm going to put a squiggly equal sign. You don't have to if you don't want to. I put a squiggly equal sign just because I have decimals and I'm going to round them when I write them down.
Get to where it's like x equals plus or minus. Where 12 plus 4, you have to put
It's a good skill to be able to plug it in and like know how to get those answers. So when you write it and have the square root in the answer, that's called the exact form. Once you've plugged it into the calculator and gotten the decimals, that's called the approximate form.
So would there be like questions where it'd be like you have to do either one?
Yeah, sometimes the problems will say find the exact answer for this, solve this, find the exact answer, or solve this and round to the nearest tenth or something, and that would tell you that you're going to plug it in the calculator and get the decimal. All right, let's do another problem. All right, x squared plus 2x plus 37 equals 0. So what do I do first? Whitney, put your phone away. Subtract 37. So we have x squared plus 2x plus blank equals negative 37. And then what should we do? Take the middle term, we're going to divide by 2, and we get 1. And then what do we do with that? Yeah, you square it. So 1 squared is, it just happens to be 1 this time. And then what do we do with the 1? Put it in the blank. So I put 1 over here, and if I add 1 to the left side, what do I do to the right side? I add the 1 over there as well, okay? And now I'm going to try skipping the factoring part. I'm going to use my little shortcut. What goes in the parentheses squared? Plus 1. So I'm going to put x, and then because I got a 1 when I divided by 2, that's what goes in the parentheses. X plus 1 squared. Yeah. No. You can after we take notes. Okay. They didn't tell us. I'm not sure. I have no idea. Yeah. All right, and then tell me what it equals. Negative 36. Okay. And now if I want to solve for x, what do I do from here? I'm going to square root. Okay. Square root left side, square root the right side. What happens when I square root negative 36? I'm going to have the I thing, okay? And then how many answers am I going to have? 2. Why would I have the I? Somebody tell me? Because it's got a negative. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to make this a positive and stick an I in the front. Okay? What is the square root of 36? 6. So I'm going to have 6i, and I have to make sure to have 2 answers. So what are my 2 answers? Plus and minus. Okay, so I'm going to say positive 6i and negative 6i. Okay. And then over here, I have x plus 1. Okay? So how do I solve for x? Okay, subtract the 1. Subtract the 1. Okay, so x equals plus or minus 6i minus 1. And we're just going to leave it there. We've never dealt with that before, so we're going to stop. Okay? How are we feeling about these problems? Are they getting a little bit easier? I think we're back on. I think they gave us a few more minutes for second period because it was cut into so much. But I'm guessing this is probably more back on regular. Yeah. Okay. We're going to do x squared plus 14x minus 1 equals 0. Okay. What should we do first? Add 1 to the other side, okay? x squared plus 14x plus blank equals 1. Okay, take the 14, divide by 2, and we get 7. Wait, do we put 7 in the blank? Square it. Okay, 7 squared is 49. Okay, so the 49 we're putting in the blank, and then we're putting the 49 in the blank, or well, we're adding 49 to the right side because we added it to the left side. Okay, so now on the left side I have parentheses squared, and then what do I have on the right side? 50, okay. And what is in the parentheses? X plus 7, okay. And we're square rooting both sides. Okay. And what should I do now? Okay, so I have... Okay, so what do I write for this?
Oh,
Would it be x plus 7 equals?
X plus 7. That's not a perfect square, right? So I'm going to leave it as a square root 50, but what am I going to put in front of it? Plus or minus. There's going to be 2 answers there. You don't need an I because it's not negative. Okay. And then what should I do? Subtract the 7. So x equals plus or minus square root 50 minus 7. Okay. So that's my exact answers. To get my approximate answers, I just have to plug this into a calculator, see what I get. Mm-hmm.
So when we took the math 2 exam, we had questions on there that had sin, cos, and tan.
Mm-hmm.
What is that?
That's trig.
tangent.
It's right triangle trig.
Never mind. I didn't. Was I right? I was wrong. No, I was right. It's cosine, sine, tangent, and is there another one?
Mm-hmm. Cotangent, secant, and cosecant. Yep. Okay, I'm going to give you guys one to do. And then I'm going to make copies of a worksheet that we can do some practice on. Okay. Okay, so what did you guys do after you moved the 5 over? That's the easy part, right? What's the next step? Divide by 2. 6 divided by 2 is 3. And then we did 3 squared is? Okay, so 9 is the number that completes the square. And you got to put it on the other side, okay? And so in the parentheses, we have what? X plus 3 squared. Okay, and then what do we have on the other side? 4. We have 4. Okay, so when you started solving it, what did you get? You have to square root, and the square root of 4 is, but not just 2, plus or minus 2, and then we have x plus 3 over here. And what do? Subtract the 3. So x equals positive and negative 2, subtract a 3 on the end. So we're going to have two answers, right? If we have the positive 2 subtract 3, what do we get? Negative 1. And then negative 2 subtract 3. Negative 5. Perfect. Okay. All right. So on this worksheet, we will not do all of it because it's got 9 problems. That's not too bad. But it has a couple problems, so I don't have to keep thinking of them off the top of my head. So we are going to start with we'll start with number 6. Okay. So starting with number 6, they already moved the number over for you. So in number 6, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to rewrite it, and we're going to put our little blank space in there, okay? So I'm going to give you guys the papers, we're going to rewrite, we're going to put our little blank space in there, and then we're going to finish that problem. So rewrite number 6, put the blank space in there. Whew. I think I counted correctly, but I don't. So looking at number 6, we're going to rewrite the problem so that we have our blank space where we want it. Yep. Absolutely, this sheet does not have very much room. And then see if you guys can go ahead and do the process of completing the square to solve it. So we divided by 2, we got 3. 3 squared is 9, we added 9 to both sides. So x plus 3 squared is 24. And then we square root of both sides, we got plus minus the square root of 24. And then we subtracted the 3 over. This is not going to match any of the answers because they used simplified radicals and we have not been simplifying. Yeah, that's why it's different than the answer choices. So what I would do if you want to match it to one of the answer choices is look and see which answer choices have a negative 3 in them, and then we can type in the radical in and see which decimals match. So we have I is one of the answers it could be. It's probably not S because we didn't have a fraction like that. Or it could be Y. The root 3 is probably not going to be root 24 anyway, but the 2 root 6 could be. So let's double check root 24 and 2 root 6 and see if those are the same. 24, 2 square root 6. Those are the same. So it's Y. It's answer Y. So this is the same as answer Y. Okay. Were we able to do it okay? Yes? Okay. So here's what I'm going to do for your homework. You're going to do number 7. And I'll have you guys do number 5. 5 and 7 for homework. Sound good? Okay. 5 and 7.